Welcome to the Valenta 2.0 weekly podcast. I'm Howard Baruchsis, a managing director with Valenta here in Miami, Florida.
And I'm Jake Day. I'm a managing partner for Northwest Arkansas and also the Atlanta, Georgia area.
The Valenta 2.0 weekly podcast is where we talk about the latest trends in technology for the week and digital transformation, as well as what is new in the world of Valenta. Jake, do you want to start us off and talk about what you found interesting in the world of digital transformation and automation this past week?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to focus on one of our technology partners that haven't really focused on a whole lot. Their name is Datarobot, and their CEO and president, Debajan Saha. They put out a couple of good pieces this week that I was really excited to read. He did a podcast. He did it on a podcast called More Intelligent Tomorrow. On this podcast, he talks a little bit about his career, what brought him into kind of robotic process automation, AI, and machine learning and such. He shares his thoughts on kind of where the future of it's going to go and just some general advice for how to deploy it. But he had some really good takeaways that I really identified with. So for example, he said that for AI and machine learning to succeed, we need to set the proper expectations. I think that's really important because a lot of organizations and people who maybe don't know a whole lot about AI and machine learning, especially if you're a small or you're a mid-sized player, you're just not getting introduced to it. You might not have big tech teams. That's the reason why you'd be looking for managed service provider, right? A lot of times the expectation is that it's this kind of magical solution that's super easy to implement and it just solves all the company's problems, right? And don't get me wrong, it does do some very, very powerful stuff, but we just have to keep in mind, that there's certain managing the expectations is key to making sure that your business needs are going to be met. And so he talks a lot about what those proper expectations are. Also, he talks about how AI can help with better decision making, but there's got to be a return on investment to make it worthwhile. I think that's one of the things that I push all the time with my clients. Definitely we want to automate, but also I'm helping clients as well make sure that they're managing their ROI, making sure that they're getting the benefit from it, making sure that they're automating the right things to get the maximum ROI. Don't just automate to automate. You want to automate with the purpose of driving business outcomes. And so that's what really measuring that ROI can do for you. And then another thing that he talks about is that it's not all about technology, right? We hear a lot about technology, and this technology is super exciting, but it's also about process and it's also about company culture. This is one of the things that we run into quite a bit whenever we're introducing robotic process automation to a business that maybe hasn't been exposed to this type of technology before. It can make a lot of people uncomfortable, right? A lot of times that the company and the employees, they've been in operations mode. They haven't been in innovation mode, right? And so helping people understand kind of the innovation and the problem solving perspective. We're doing a lot of this to drive efficiencies, right? And we're not doing this to put anybody out of a job. What we're doing is we're trying to make business processes more efficient so that we can reallocate labor so that we can grow organizations more quickly, right? Technology is not going to solve that. There's a level of process and culture that has to be in place, that has to come along aside technology in order to make sure that it's going to be effective in the organization that it's implemented in. And so it's a really good podcast. I would definitely recommend that folks check it out.
All right. So I had a few, but I'll just tease with one to start. So I was on the site of our good friends at Yellow.ai, and they had a very interesting article about 60 simple chatbot ideas. And I would say they were all simple, but it was very comprehensive of a list, and I really liked it. And they broke it down by different industries that lend themselves well to conversational AI and chatbots that are smart. They talked about retail, they talked about travel and hospitality, they talked about banking and insurance, education, they talked about healthcare, and they talked about real estate. And then they went through each of these individual industries, and they had, gosh, about 4 or 5 each, probably, at least 5 if I mentioned 6, to get to 60 different chatbot ideas that were very, very interesting. So that was something that caught my eye this past week.
I did find it actually. It was from Datarobot. I had it on my screen and it disappeared from me. But Datarobot recently announced that they have a new feature. It's called Datarobot AI Cloud. Just wanted to put this on the radars of our listeners. This looks like a really exciting tool that can be used in order as you kind of implement RPA in the organization. If you're a coder or developer, one of the things it looks like they're doing here is they are giving you a little bit of access and visibility into a lot of the code on the back end so that you can do a deeper kind of data analysis and that type of thing. One of the things, though, if you're a non-coder, that I think that our listeners will like is that they've greatly expanded their set of what they call solution accelerators. So this is going to be a lot of pre-built automations and integrations and no-code AI that can be applied to fairly common business processes, probably processes that are specifically common to kind of the small and the mid-sized market, which we really try to target with our listeners. So you definitely want to check that out. We'll link to it in the show notes.
All right, I had a couple more that caught my eye, and another was from a company I really love and I talk about frequently, Tableau. They published an article about embedded analytics, build or buy. That was pretty much the title. And build or buy is always a very interesting conversation for many, many different companies. And guess what? They came down on the buy type of the part of the argument. And usually buy is better for speed, to get something out, for maybe bringing in outside experts. At Valenta, we happen to be outside experts, so we love it when people buy, but we think that there's a lot of advantages too. Usually we can do it actually more cost effectively than they would have to do it internally, and they point that out. They talk about all the opportunity cost that you lose when you build something on your own. They talked about how you don't necessarily have people who are experts at building analytics and embedded BI, doing those types of things, where you can come to somebody like Tableau or somebody like Valenta who works with folks like Tableau and implement that for a company. Do it fast, do it quick, do it with the latest technology, and you really let people focus on what they do best. And at Valenta, that's what we're all about, is helping people focus on what they do best by doing some of the things that we do best. But thought it was an interesting article, pretty comprehensive, and really went through all the upsides of buying versus building, and some of the downsides of building, but of course why people would like to do it, and why many times it's hard not to gravitate in that direction, but sometimes it's best not to. One other last thing that caught my eye, Jake, is that like you, I get a lot of solicitations for market research papers. And one caught my eye recently this past week from a company called Market Research, very imaginative name. But the market study was interesting. It was about RPA. And they were stating that the CAGR for RPA growth is going to be 60.4% from 2022 to 2027. So over the next 5 years, 60% growth. I thought that was really outstanding. It's one of the higher numbers that I've heard, and I definitely believe it based on the activity that we see in the marketplace. They referenced companies like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism, who we all know and follow and work with in the paper. And they definitely talked about different market sectors that we see implementing RPA at a rapid clip, like banking and financial services, healthcare, retail, telecom, one of my favorites, and manufacturing. So it looked like a very good market research paper. I don't want to give a plug to the people, but it looked reasonably priced. But I just thought that CAGR number of 60% really jumped out at me. And I think part of it is that RPA is really kind of expanding outside of the Fortune 1000, and it's really getting into all businesses now. We're a part of that, and I definitely see that. But that's what jumped out at me this past week in the world of digital transformation and automation. Jake, is there anything that you want to talk about that's going on in your Valenta practice from the past week?
Yeah, did an exciting announcement, an exciting press release this past week. As our listeners are familiar with, I've joined the Bentonville Chamber of Commerce here in Bentonville, Arkansas. And one of the things that we did this past week is we're pledging 100 hours of free consulting to small and mid-sized businesses that are members of the Bentonville Chamber of Commerce, just to give back to the community and to show that we're going to put forth an investment in helping to grow these businesses, a good faith investment. So I was really excited to announce that. Have a couple of exciting things going with some clients. We're going to present a proof of concept that is pretty slick. It's pretty good in terms of automating and especially keeping customers in the loop on how where a complaint is in a customer complaints process. Howard, I'm sure that you've needed to send back something to a company or you've complained about something and you wonder, well, what are they doing about it, right? Especially if they owe you either a refund or an exchange on the product or the such. And so that's what this company wanted to address. And we've come up with a really good solution using a combination of smart sheets and also robotic process automation in order to make sure that the customer stays in the loop constantly, all the time, as to where their complaint is in the process. So really excited to show that. And then also we have another client in the medical field. We're expanding, working on expanding, actually adding some robotic process automation to do just more manual document retrieval type processes. And so excited to be working on that as well. They're a great client. What do you have going on, Howard?
A few things, monitoring your RPA activity. I've been involved in some of that, and also some of my own staffing projects in South Florida have been keeping me busy. And I like the complaint management project that you're working on, because I know that's a telecom related company. And we had a little incident in my household where we had somebody roaming overseas, and we had done all the right things to make sure that we had international roaming plans set up and everything. But we kept getting these messages of like, well, we used $200 in roaming charges this day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And it was like $1,000 by the end of the week. And we had done everything we needed to do. And we ended up having to call the provider multiple times. It would have been nice to have a tracking of what work was going on or what was not going on at that particular provider over the past week. Anyways, I digress. What was going on with me and Valenta besides the staffing and being a little bit involved in some of your interesting projects? I think that's it. On the Valenta side, we did publish a few interesting articles this past week I'd like to call out. There was something that came out on database administrators and how you can outsource and leverage them, Python developers as well, and cybersecurity. And then, of course, the Bentonville Chamber of Commerce was on our website as well. So we got that out there as well. So that is what's going on in the world of Valenta, as well as my practice. We heard about yours. We heard about what was going on in the world of digital transformation. I think that's a wrap. Jake, you got anything else you want to share?
Actually, I will add on. It's one piece you'd mentioned a little bit of your staffing activity and the such. And as listeners are thinking about how they can rapidly solve business problems and deploy robotic process automation and AI and all this cool stuff that we talk about, one of the things that folks can keep in mind is if you've got processes that are behind right now, because we're still in a tight labor market. If you have processes that are behind right now, a good way to quickly get the jump start on getting caught up on those processes is to lead with staffing. Because what I do as a consultant is I'll follow up any staffing engagement very quickly with mapping processes and such. And then at that point, we can come in after the staffing engagement and say, hey, well, robotic process automation maybe makes sense here, or maybe, it might not be an unattended bot where we can automate the whole process, but we can continue to make it more efficient on top of those staffing engagements. So I don't want our listeners to think that it's an either or, staffing versus automation. These two solutions very much coexist and has a tremendous amount of synergy. So I just wanted to call that out for our listeners.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the people can always be redeployed to higher value work that requires creative thinking, customer interface, and that type of thing. So, yeah, good stuff. Well, look, that is our episode of Valenta 2.0 Weekly this week. We will be back talking to you next week. Have an awesome week.